So call Yosef.
Okay, 29th of March, Rabbi Moore, Pesach Hagada.
No,
Hi, sorry, I was late.
I don't see you, Lou. Okay,
Okay, can I ask you now?
Yeah.
dozed off.
Back.
I don't hear you. Oh, wow, well, 1 second. Okay. Okay. He comes back. Michiel, you hear me? Michiel, do you hear me?
Really?
Yeah, good. Fine. Let's see what happened to me. Oh, wait. Second. No. There we go. I don't know where Lou went to. Anyway, just we got up to the Hishamda. I'm now going to say this is really where the actual story begins. Now it's interesting that the compiler of the Hagada basically concentrates the telling of on 4 psukim, which are what's called mikra bikurim. Those are when somebody brings bikurim, farmer brings bikurim to the kohen, as he's obliged to do once a year. Then he brings a basket of the first fruits of his orchards or whatever, of his produce. And then he's got to make a kilo. It's not really not confession, it's a pronouncement, an affirmation, maybe that's the best word. And he basically says over the 4 psukim which the Torah prescribes, he says over, which basically, in a nutshell, just 1 second. I've got opposition here from you.
Who wants to notice this?
Put the music down, please. Can you turn the music down?
I don't know, throw it out. Don't throw out the bottle, just throw out the contents, not the bottle.
Anyway, the 4 psukim are basically starts off as follows: that how Yaakov Avinu went down to Egypt, that's Arami Ovidovi, and how the Jewish people grew when they were in Egypt. Then the turnabout that the Mitzrayim started afflicting the Jewish people through making the then the 3rd pasuk is that the Jewish people cried out to Hashem. And Hashem heard their cries. And the 4th pasuk is HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Egypt. Okay, and the Balagod is going to explain each step by step, but he uses it as a springboard, basically, to tell the story pretty much in detail. I mean, technically, if you just said those psukim, he's actually fulfilled the mitzvah, but it's a very brief précis of everything that happened. But it's kedai, whatever time allows or whatever, to be able to elaborate more, and more especially to try and relive what the Jewish people went through in Egypt because if you just step back a little bit and imagine, put oneself in what it was like being there in Egypt. I mean, I'll take an example, just an example. The recent earthquake that was in Turkey. And you can ask any person who was there, just imagine who was there. It was just horrendous, the destruction that took place then. And albeit the Egypt, there wasn't an earthquake, but they went through 10 extraordinary plagues. And the whole place, by the time the plagues had finished, right, the whole country, the Egyptian country, was totally, the infrastructure was ruined. The whole place was a shambles. Anyway, okay, let's start off with as follows. Say ulamat. Ma bikish lovan arami lasis liyaakov avinu. Let's first of all go and try to understand what did the Lovan, the Arami, the Aramean, what did he do to Yaakov Avinu? Shapara lagoza el aschorim, ve'lovan bikesh lakes hakol. Now the Bala Hagada tells us something, a statement which doesn't seem so relevant to Leila Seder. And he dwells on a point which he says as follows, let's try and understand, right, what Lavan was up about, what was he up to? What were his intentions? Right? Because Paro only made a gzera against the males, while Lavan wished to uproot everything. Shenema, as it says, and this is where we're going to start with it. Arami Obedovi Vayered Mitzrayim. The Aramean wished to destroy my father. Actually, it's interesting that it's put in terms, the Torah uses the term, the Aramean is destroying my father. It's a present tense. The Aramean is destroying my father. Vayered Mitzrayim, and he went down to Egypt. Vayogo Shombim Sebot, and he dwelt there. We sojourned there with only few in number. Vayisham, and he became there, Lagoy Godel Otzum Barov, to a great, powerful, and numerous nation. Okay. Okay, so the Maiset's interesting point is as follows. And the Chayra, this is what the Bala Hagada is telling us, indicating to us over here. Why does the Pesach needs to mention that Yaakov Avinu Arami Obedovi, Vayered Mitzrayim? The Aramean wished to, I'll translate wish to destroy. It's an interesting point that a wish, right, if it's not put into action, never ends. Because if I intend to do something and I put it into action, once the action is done, that's it. But if I want to do something and I don't actually succeed in fulfilling it yet, so my wish is still continually existing. Okay? It continues. So therefore, when it says Arami Obedovi, and this is Chazal, learn out from here as well, that when a goy, a non-Jewish person, wants to do something harmful to the Jewish people, right? His harmful intention is considered as if he's actually done it. In other words, he will get punished as if he's actually carried out that action. Is because we say that when a goy, wishes to attack a Jew, it's a proper intention. It's not something just that his anger or his Yetzer Hara got the better of him. That, in essence, the goy hates the standard goy, right? Has a level of hatred to the Jews that he wants to actually, if he has a desire to destroy them, he wants to go ahead and do it. So even if he hasn't done it yet, it's considered as if he's done it. Anyway, but there's a major question over here, and that's what I want to dwell. The Torah, if the Torah is telling us our history, what does it have to mention about love on anything? It just says Yaakov Yorad Mitzrayma, okay, or Avinu, Avi Yorad Mitzrayma. Our father went down to Egypt. Vayogav Shomim Semot. Why does it mention Bechlal bringing love on it too? And in addition, where do we see that Paro only decreed upon the males, while Lavan intended to uproot everything? What do you see in the pasuk over here? You see Arami over point over here. Avram, Kosh Baruch Hu told Avram Avinu in the Brisbane Absorim, you should know your descendants are going to be strangers in a foreign land, and they're going to have to serve them, and they're going to even be afflicted by them. And afterwards, they're going to go out, they're going to be redeemed. The Kosh Baruch Hu, I'm going to redeem them, and they're going to go out as free people. The Torah never mentions anywhere that it was going to be in Egypt. It could have been anywhere. So the question is now, Yaakov Avinu is spending 20 years in the house of Lavan. And after 20 years, Akash Baruch Hu says, run away from it, get out of it quick. The question is, why did Akash Baruch Hu do not let Yaakov Avinu carry out the promise of exile in the house of Lavan? Let Yaakov Avinu stay in the house of Lavan. Let Lavan make trouble for him. But at least he can fulfill the decree of Hashem there. Tells us the Hagada, and this is what's indicated, Arami Oived Avi, that Lavan wished to wipe out the Jewish people in their entirety. Yaakov and in all his descendants, Lavan wanted to wipe them out to the last being. So therefore Hashem said, I can't let Yaakov Avinu stay there, even if it is to fulfill being in Galus, being in exile. No way. Therefore, because Yaakov Avinu could not fulfill the promise of exile in Lavan's house, because Lavan wanted to uproot everything, therefore, Vayered Mitzrayma. That's why Yaakov ended up going down to Egypt. Because Lemaisa, historically, there was no connection between the two. After Lavan, Yaakov Avinu came back from the house of Lavan, he was 99 years old. He didn't go down to Mitzrayim until 31 years later. There's no historical connection between the two. Elamai, why is the Torah telling us, seeming that there's a connection between the two? The answer is, Hakadosh Baruch Hu says, since Lavan's intention was to wipe out Yaakov and all his descendants, Hakadosh Baruch Hu saw that it was impossible to carry out the decree of the Brisbane Absorim, that the Avram's descendants are going to be strangers in a foreign land and they're going to be servants and be afflicted. That cannot be fulfilled in the house of Lavan. Therefore, Vayered Mitzrayim. That's why Yaakov Avinu had to go down to Egypt and to fulfill Hashem's promise there. Okay? Now, let's see. So the Hagada goes down. Let's go to 3. I'm going to go through it quickly. Whatever we have to say, I'll add it in as we go. Vayered Mitzrayim, they went down to Egypt. Since the pasuk uses a terminology of going down, this seems as a lowering of Yaakov Avinu's spiritual level. It means when he had to go to Egypt, this was considered for Yaakov Avinu a major, I should say, major tzara, major trouble for him, because the Egypt was the home of decadence in those days. The Egyptians were a very decadent people, and for him to go to such a place was considered a spiritual decline. So therefore, that's why it says Vayered Mitzrayim, and that's what the pasuk says. Onos api adibo. If Yaakov Avinu Be'etzim had been asked, you're going to go into exile, where do you want to go? He may not necessarily have chosen Egypt B'chlal. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, no, this is where I decree that this is where the exile should be fulfilled. And therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, oh no, you've got to go down there, even if whether you like it or not, you've got to go there. By Yogo Shop. Now the Lashon Yogo means expression of sojourning, a temporary stay. Yaakov Avinu's intention was not to settle properly in Egypt as his home, but to only sojourn there. Okay, I'm not going to sub this. Okay, I'm going to skip out all the rise from the psukim because it's going to take things. It's going to make it a bit long-winded. So I'm just doing the major points. Okay. By the way, and this is actually the secret of the Jewish survival in Golus, is if we realize that wherever the Jewish people end up, and we unfortunately still experiencing Golus now, albeit maybe in different ways than they did originally, but it's also major tests for the Jewish people. But the secret of survival of the Jewish people in Golus is to treat it as an exile. Not to try to say, well, okay, we were once upon a time in Eretz Israel, and now we can find a new home. Maybe I'm just going back to originally it was Bovel when they left, and then afterwards they were exiled to Rome and other places. God, there was always a major presence in Bovel. And later on it was the countries that let them in and let the Jewish people prosper, Spain, and before the expulsion, and where else it was, in Poland and Russia before the Khmelnytsky riots in 1648. And then I'm talking about even before that, in the France and Germany before the Crusades, and afterwards in the more recent times in Germany and the entire Europe and Poland and everywhere else in Europe, okay, till Klal Yisrael had to be driven out from there, sometimes in a more gentle way, sometimes in a worse way. But either way, the idea is that we realize, actually there's a very interesting Gemara in Baba Basra. The Gemara says there, tells over that Rabbi Baba Chona, he went on various travels. And Gemara tells over stories. It looks like, sea tales, okay? But Lamaisa, there's a lesson to be learned from all of them. Anyway, one of the stories goes as follows. Rabbi Bachar says, we were traveling on the boat, and we thought we came to what was an island, okay? And we got off the boat, and we started lighting a fire, and ready to make ourselves some food and to warm ourselves. So suddenly the supposed island keeled over, and it was actually a large fish, a whale. I don't know, some say it was a whale. And because we were heating up the fire, it got a little bit hot for him, right? So the whale keeled over, and the Mele and the Lashon Gemara said, if we hadn't been far from the boat, we would have drowned. Says the Mepharshim, I can't remember who it is, as follows. This is a moshel of Jewish people in exile. We're put into exile to move around, not to be settled in one particular place. If the Jewish people, wherever they may settle, get too warm, get too settled in that place, what's going to happen is the place of settlement is going to keel over and going to throw us out. And if we're not far from the boat, which is a symbol of the Torah, then Chas v'Shalom we would be totally destroyed. So you see from here the idea of the Jewish people, how the attitude that Jewish people have to have when they are in exile, moving necessarily from place to place, is that we are in exile. we will try to make do as best we can by setting up institutions like shuls and schools and yeshivas and etc. to maintain our Jewish living whilst we're in this place. But let us not for a moment think that this is, we've come to the our final settling place, whether it be Borough Park or, I don't know, Williamsburg or whatever. That's not our end place. That's a place that we're still in Golos there. And I'll tell you, we're also still in Golos, albeit in a different way. But the Maisa, we haven't yet come to the ideal situation that we're back in our land under a, shall we say, a Torah-dic government, where everything is being run according on Torah lines. So maybe we have to realize we're still in Golos, and the best way for us to survive there is to realize that we're still in Golos, and not try to settle in such a way in Golos that we think, we've come now to our home, we can set up a proper home here, everything will be fine, and this is the place where we're going to be for the next, I don't know how many generations. It's not ain't so necessarily so. Okay, so that's the idea. So Yaakov Avinu didn't go down to settle in Egypt, but only Logo Sham to be there temporarily. Okay. B'mseimot, we're only a few in number. Now, there were 70 Yidden there. In other words, Yaakov Avinu came down together with altogether 70 descendants. Vayishom Lagoy, and he became there as a nation. So this tells us a very interesting point, that the Jews maintained a Jewish identity when they were in Egypt. Albeit there were elements that did assimilate, but there was always, even in their assimilation, they may have assimilated into the Egyptian culture, but there was never a loss of the actual Jewish identity. In fact, the Chazal say that in merit of 3 things, the Jewish people merited to be freed. Shloshinu, 3 things they didn't change. Shloshinu l'shoinom, they didn't change their language. Shloshinu es shemam, they didn't change their names. And Shloshinu es malbusham, they didn't change their mode of clothing, the clothes that they wore. But still, the Jews still were noticeably distinct from the rest of the Egyptians.
I've heard those things before, Rabbi, but I never heard that it was because of that we merited to be redeemed. I thought we merited to be redeemed because, number one, we cried out to Hashem, and Hashem heard our cry and remembered his promise. And number 2, we have by your blood you shall live, by your blood you shall live. There was 2 mitzvahs, the mitzvah of bris
Right, the mitzvah of Milah and Korban Pesach.
Korban Pesach.
Okay, the Maisa it also says b'schus noshim tzidkonios nigalu mitzrayim, v'osidim ligoel as well later in the future when Mashiach will come. The various different chazal which tell us different reasons, and l'chayra all are true. I mean, that's for sure. I'm not saying, but all, there's no necessarily contradiction between them. Just each opinion is making emphasis on a certain aspect. But they all contributed to the merit of the redemption with which the Jewish people achieved when they came out of Mitzrayim. Okay. Now, Godol vayishom legoy, Godol otzum. So it's 2 things. Vayishem legoy, Godol otzum varov. So Godol means great, and otzum means powerful. Okay, so so Chazal say, we bring the passage. So they multiplied and spread out and increased, and they became tremendously powerful. The land became filled with them. Okay, Now, that's as far as their numbers and their physical strength is concerned. Barov, now it's interesting. We commonly translated as Rov as meaning many in number. But here it's clearly that the Bala Hagada understands it as being as the Aramaic for Godol is Rov, Rabbo. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mabarach, may the great name of Hashem. So Rov can also mean greatness. Okay? In the sense of great in deeds, not necessarily great in number, but great in deeds and great in character. So that's what the Pasuk is telling us, the Cheres forest. It's also great in number. I made you as like the myriads of, I make you, how should we say, numerous, like the vegetation of the field. You increased and you became great. And you, how should I translate that? Okay, see, actually here he brings the prayer, which means that they multiplied by many herds. Right? Means you became fully grown, right? But you were still at Aaron Be'erio, you were still naked and bare. I passed over you, and I saw that you were, how should you say, wading in your blood. And I said to you, with your blood, live. And I said to you again, with your blood, live. And as you mentioned before, Lou, there's two, as we discussed, two mitzvahs which Klal Yisrael did with the blood. They were zocha to leave Egypt. The source of those two mitzvahs, the mitzvah of Dam Mila and Dam Korban Pesach, the blood of the circumcision, and Dam Korban Pesach, the blood of the Korban Pesach. Okay, so there's combining two things over here. One is the physical multiplication, the proliferance of the Jewish people, and also too that the fact that they were great, the greatness of the Jewish people, that they accepted upon themselves and which involved blood. Okay, so that's the first pasuk. So the first pasuk says that Arami Obedovi Vayed Mitzrayma, was the Lavan wanted to wipe us out, so therefore Yaakov went down to Egypt, and they sojourned there merely as a few, ostensibly only with a few in number, and then they became there into a tremendously great nation in number and character. Okay, now next passage. So this is the second stage. The Egyptians made things bad for us. Okay, and we'll see more about this, what exactly more it means specifically. Doesn't at this point mean necessarily physical harm, but it means the Egyptians considered us as bad people. It means they spread the words. The media inculcated the Egyptian people with a hatred against the Jews because, how do you call it? The Jews are our misfortune. Okay, famous phrase. Actually translated from the German. It's actually, by the way, die Juden sind unser Unglück, right? The Jews are our misfortune. Okay, do you know who actually was the first one to make that statement? It wasn't Himmler or Goering or whatever, whoever the ones who were in charge of the Nazi propaganda campaign. Meister, they used it in Die Stürmer, which was the Nazi propaganda newspaper against the Jews. They used that phrase. But interesting enough, the first one to coin that phrase was none less than Martin Luther. who is on the one hand did a service by breaking away from the Catholic government, Catholic Church, and making should we see a founder of Protestantism. But on the other hand, he was a tremendous hater, Jew hater, and he was the one who composed that phrase, "The Jews are our misfortune." Okay, anyway.
It's interesting that he was such a terrible anti-Semite, and he started Lutheranism, and in World War II, the nation that was the most beneficial to the Jews was a Lutheran nation.
Who was?
Denmark.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's the nation where they say that the neighbors took care of the
I know.
watered their plants and things like that. They were
And
Lutherans.
not only that, they said they actually saved. Most of the Jews in Denmark were actually saved by the Goyim.
Right. And I actually
Nazis.
had some friends in America who were from Denmark. They told us stories about how they were rescued.
Right.
By
That's
the
a tremendous story. I have a brother-in-law, his name is Winkler, Rabbi Winkler. He's also a Gabbai of Chaniche. Anyway, his parents were saved, and so was his father's brother. And it's a very interesting story. I haven't got time for it now. A very interesting story. My brother-in-law's uncle, who lived in America, he passed away not so long ago, just about a year ago, I think, maybe even less. Maybe less than a year ago, well over the age of 100. And he had a tremendous story of how they were saved, and the